Hey everyone, welcome back to the REConnect Podcast. Today I have Kayla McDonald with me, a real estate agent and realtor, and just got to know her a little bit. I was actually on her podcast yesterday, and so if you're in the market for a new listen, I would highly recommend her weekly show that she does on Tuesdays with Lindsay Weber, and they have great guests on, and it's a great all-around podcast. So I'd encourage you to reach out to Kayla and see where that one's housed at the moment. And so today we're going to start with Kayla's purpose that I asked her pre-show, and what she said her purpose was helping people and developing relationships. And so that statement is both very specific and very vague at the same time, and I love the fact that that is the way it works. So, Kayla, I see you smiling and laughing because you knew exactly what you did when you typed it in, and so I'd love to hear kind of where that came from, how you developed that, and kind of how you operate within that.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I feel like like you said, we got to know each other pretty well more at yesterday, on our show. So again, thank you for being on. Um, and when I saw what that question was, obviously I'm not going to type a long paragraph. So I figured I would be a little bit vague and we could talk about it more. So helping people is something I've always wanted to do just at a very young age. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. At one point I was going to be a therapist, which I started to go to school for that. And then it turns out I didn't really, once I was in it, that's not something that I wanted to do full time, even though I feel like and I'm sure you feel this way too in our industry. I feel like I am a part-time, full-time therapist to a lot of my clients. Um, so and I feel that within real estate, as a real estate agent, you're like, well, how are you really helping people? Well, you are. You're helping people by education. You're helping them find a home, sell a home. And every scenario is different. So that's kind of also where the developing relationships comes into play too. Um, if you're walking through this industry and you're not developing a relationship with somebody, then you're doing it wrong. And I don't know how the two don't go together. To me, I have a relationship with each one of my clients and they're all different, even when sometimes some drive me crazy, but but I love them all, and they all have a different story. And it's really fun to me to hear their stories, why they're moving, why they want to buy a house. Like for instance, I have a 20-year-old right now that's buying her first property. And I'm like, when I was 20 years old, I was not thinking about buying a house, so I'm just, I feel, very proud, and I feel like, let me help you. I can mentor you. I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I did. And she's just, and I learn from them too. Like I learn from her. I'm 34 years old and I can learn so much from this 20-year-old. I mean, she was just telling me, she's like, I'm so cheap. This was last night. She's like, I'm so cheap. She's like, I go and I get my clothes from, Goodwill or Salvation Army. And a lot of times they're brand new. And I have $5 to spend, or that I want to spend. And, all this stuff. She took, not to go on a tangent on that, but it's just amazing to see those types of values in such a young individual, when I feel like a lot of things we see online just in this world is negative towards the younger generation. So, you know, I think just like meeting her is kind of brings light and hope to our younger generation, that it's not like what the stereotype everyone thinks, that our younger generation is just they're a lost cause. They're not, because she's doing everything that she needs to do, wants to do. She has dreams and aspirations, and her drive is, she's like, okay, I'm going to buy this house, and then in a couple years I'm going to rent it out and I'm going to buy a different one. And I'm like, you're just amazing.
I think
Um,
I think the stereotype there with the younger generation is often that they don't do things that they don't want to do, and like
mhm,
that's looked at as a bad thing by so many people. And
mhm,
really, the you know you and I are kind of stuck in the middle of that, right? Like we can lean either way with that. But generally the older generation, they had to do a lot of things that they didn't want to do. And so
Mhm.
like, I feel like that's where that comes from, especially in regards to real estate. They could buy their house really young because they were locked into careers and jobs that they didn't want to be locked into long term. And,
Right.
now 40 years later, the company fires them and no pension, or the company shuts down and they're like, well, like, what do I get out of that? So I think the younger generation is almost like, me leaning to that side. It's a little bit better off long term because they're able to recognize what they want and what they don't want, and they go after what they want with a passion. And
Right.
like the fact that you're able to kind of step into that scenario, whether you were placed there or she found you, or however that connection was made and that relationship was made, to be able to step into that scenario and guide her with information that you have that she needs, that's a huge aspect of what you do.
Right.
And how are you navigating that a little bit? Because obviously, especially with people with experience in the industry, we can step into this role of like, I'm the big brother, the big sister. Like, how do you kind of pull back a little bit from that and separate that and just like really lean into the professional advice aspect?
I'm just very, very honest and upfront with her about everything. And I don't know exactly how I do that, but I don't try and push her on with what I think she should do. I think that's the one thing, if she asks me for that advice, well, what would you do? What do you think? Then I can give her my opinion. But I always let her know, like, look, this is your life. So you have to make this choice. But if it was me in this position, this is what I would do. But I know that we talked about taxes a lot yesterday. So I, prepared her very well with that. Hey, when you buy this house and this specific property we're under contract with, taxes are very low. So she's buying in Pasco County. They have a really great tax estimator. I went on there and I said, this is what you could be looking at. Now we won't know, but this is what you're going to want to do. You're going to want a homestead, this, that, and the other. So, I really just want to make sure, like, hey, if you have, another $200 or $300 on top of your payment, are you okay with that? Do you feel comfortable? She says, yes, I understand. I'll prepare for that. So I said, okay, good. I just want to make sure you're prepared and you're not calling me in a year saying, what the heck? My payment went up. And, she just feels very comfortable with her savings and how much she's spending, and she really grasps and fully understands the process and what could potentially happen in the future with her payments and insurance and everything. And she has
Yeah,
great.
great individual example of how you're, just stepping into that guidance role, and help can be defined in so many different ways. And I think that, when I mentioned that it was vague, like that's the word that sticks out as like the most vague, right? Like, because help can come in, like we've said, so many different ways, and so ultimately, like your purpose there is not necessarily just help, right? Like it's lend expertise when it's needed, or
Yeah.
and that's the thing that I think a lot of people, and I will say, especially in my industry, but often, or in my side of the industry, but oftentimes in your side as well, where real estate agents have these preconceived notions of what loan is best, for the client. And so when we approach and go, yeah, they're pre-approved for an FHA loan, well, why can't they go conventional? And it's like, that's them putting their thought process of like, well, every buyer should be a conventional buyer kind of thing. And by, where I'm going with that, or coming back to of what you said, is you mentioned that like you're not telling her what to do, right?
Yeah.
You're advising her of the options that she has, and that allows her to ultimately make the decision, which then she'll come back and go, thank you for helping me with that, not why did you force me into this?
Right, right. And I don't ever want to do that, because I know, especially when I was younger, I don't really like to feel like I'm being forced into something and to listen to what somebody else says, this is what you need to do. And I'm like, whoa, like, why are you coming at me that way? I feel a little pressure. So in when it comes to the lending, I try to stay in my lane because I don't do what you do. I don't see all of her numbers. And even if I did, I'm not going to really know what to do with that. you know? So and most of the time too, when they ask me questions, I say, hey, you need to call your loan officer because they're going to be able to tell you what you should do, shouldn't do. They're going to explain what it all means, and what the best way to go is for you, because they're the numbers person. I'm not.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, especially, that we see through the industry is there's just so much people trying to either real estate agents getting their loan officer license or loan officers getting a real estate license and trying to capture both sides of the transaction. And it's just like it's a disservice to everyone. And so when you, like you mentioned, staying in the lane, like that's so huge to be able to just say, this is what I know. I know
Mhm.
about that stuff, but this person knows about your stuff.
Right, right.
And like, there's so many reasons that we guide, yeah, especially on on the lending side, speaking from my experience, there's so many reasons that we guide people in certain directions. They may qualify for the conventional loan, but does it make sense to put them there? And real estate agents are just like, well, that's the better loan. And it's just like, that's not how this works. Like
Right. No, that it
I would
doesn't mean
never
that.
I would never send them into a bad situation or make it worse for them. That's not my goal as a person because I operate the same way you do. You don't want them coming back 6 months from now and going, Ryan, I can't afford this. Like I don't
Mhm.
want to do this anymore. And that I've only had one foreclosure in my entire 10 years. And I could look back and go, before closing, I could have said, if there's one I'm choosing, it's probably this one. Like you just kind of knew if that person was going to be that one. But that's how, responsible lending and responsible home, working with good agents, that's the idea behind it. So
Right.
um shifting back to a little bit more of your like the building relationships, how do not necessarily how do you do it one-on-one, but like developing relationships also can come into play in a connection role. Do you play that connection role with your clients, and how do you do that?
Honestly, I think it's a natural thing for me. I like to talk and I love people and I love being around people. So it comes very naturally and easy for me just to openly talk to people and, make friends and develop those connections. Of course, there are some, people that are a little bit more closed off that you might have to open them up and, let them come out of their shell. And sometimes it's listening. I have to shut my mouth and stop talking and let people talk and vent about whatever's going on in their lives, whether it has to do with a purchase or a sale. There's sometimes, for instance, I had this lady call me. I did some mailers and she called me and I was on the phone with her for like an hour. I'm not even going to sell her house. um, but we just started talking. And I think, I don't know if you are, religious or anything, but I think sometimes, God puts people in your path. And I have many conversations with people that either just find my number from online, Google, or just from an ad or something, and they'll call me and we'll just start talking about life. And it's bizarre. I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but people will open up to me and just tell me all these ins and outs of their life. And I'm intrigued, I'm interested, I'm vested. I'm like, tell me more. I want to know about your life because I don't know. I feel like if I wasn't in real estate, how would I have ever I had a call from this lady named Pam and told me all about her history, and her family was farmers, and they came over here in the 1800s. And then next thing you know, she's sending me a video about this little church that opened up in Dunedin and how it started and the orphanage. And I'm like, that is just so interesting to me. I love hearing all of that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing and I can tell this just from communicating with you. I mean, we've only spoken for a total of an hour over a long time, but just communicating with you in this setting and the setting yet or on your podcast, a lot of what you do is just taking genuine interest and being able to do that as a real estate professional. It allows other people to then care about what you're doing.
Right,
And so, you have to show, it's that give before you get mentality of like, you want to leave people better off. And sometimes that is just sitting and listening to them talk and ramble and like, God knows what comes out of their mouth, but you're able to listen and you remember it and you've got a great story to tell. And I reiterate that as much as possible is people aren't going to connect with the fact that you sold 15 homes last month.
right.
Nobody cares. And I haven't heard you in our communication talk about any of that. like you haven't talked about numbers at all, which is in a lot of situations, that's what happens is people are like, well, I sold 100 homes last year. Like, okay, cool. You're good at selling homes, but are you better at connecting? And most of the time when you get to that level, right, that connection piece is there. It's really difficult to slam out that many without some kind of referral system built into your clients.
Right.
But
Right.
but that's the biggest piece is taking genuine interest, and then people will take interest in you because they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's cliche as hell, but that is absolutely like the statement to make sure. And I think you very much emulate that, just taking an interest in people and listening to them.
Yeah.
So with your current, like with what you do on a daily basis and kind of how you operate in your business, how do people change or transform as a result of you working with them or them working with you?
Um, I think people just, develop a trust. And maybe, and I don't think that they feel, I think real estate agents get a bad rap. Some are warranted and, but I know a lot of really great individuals in the industry. And I think that, after working with me, they develop a little bit more of a trust, and I think they develop a friend, because I always stress to my clients, hey, like, call me for anything, even if you think it's stupid. If you need something or you have a question about anything, even if it's not real estate related, just call me and I'll do whatever I can to help you. And you and I also think people feel like they're wasting my time a lot. They always apologize to me, and I'm like, don't apologize to me. I'm like, if we go out to look at a house, or if you call me to talk to me about something, even if it's 5 p.m., it's okay. So I think that they, feel like they develop a little bit more trust for hopefully people in general. And I'm sorry, what was the other
Yeah,
part?
that's just like how are they changing and transforming and oftentimes we look at that coming out to the better side, which you just explained. So really the question could even be as simple as how do they change for the better? And I think, if a trust level is there after your time with them, I think that's fantastic because ultimately that's what the industry is missing is, the messaging. I mean, obviously, with the lawsuits and everything that are coming out right now that, are a big topic in the industry, that creates even more mistrust because they
Yeah,
felt, and people really hate when they look backwards and they go, I didn't see that. And then they
right.
feel, like they go through a transaction and they feel really dumb, even though it may not have happened in their transaction, just the thought of the possibility of, someone taking advantage of them, they look back and they go, yeah, that sucked. And it can change the whole thing without even anything you can do. And so, I know you like to educate, and you also mentioned the psychologist thing. I was a degree in psychology as well in college, and
Oh, wow.
after my after my 5.5 year bachelor degree, I decided that going back to school probably wasn't the best answer. And so that's like, I guess mortgage lending became the next frontier on that. So I think we probably click pretty well in that line of understanding of, people are people and helping them manage their emotion throughout the process is a big thing too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I still love psychology. I even in high school, any psychology class I could take, I took it all, and I excelled in all of them. And I don't know, I just love people, and I love just hearing about what people have gone through. Sometimes it's heartbreaking and it's horrific, but there's a lot of like redemption stories, and there's a lot of people who overcome some just amazing and tragic things, and it's just very I don't know, it's heartwarming to hear all of it. I on all aspects,
Yeah, and it's nice to recognize, it's rehumanizing because
Hmm.
a lot of times we do get stuck in that, like, okay, got to get this to closing, and it's just us going into knowing what's best at that time. But if you're going too fast, you miss that stuff, and like that's the whole thing. And that's, like you mentioned in your purpose statement of the developing relationships, like that's such a huge piece because what are you doing it for? Like if you're just chasing the money, like there's plenty of other professions that are a hell of a lot easier than real estate to go try and do that.
Hmm.
Like we talked about on yours, you could go get a job if you want to, if your ultimate goal is to just be stable, like go find a job that'll provide what you need from the income, and don't put yourself through the stress of all this. But it's such a great way for us to develop relationships, and being able to utilize learning from their past as well. I
Yeah.
feel like this business has made me a better person because of being able to connect with those. So I think I think you're right on the right track there. So
Yeah. I mean,
one
I
of
feel
the
like I could, sorry to cut you off. I feel
no,
like
you're
I
good.
could write almost a book with every single different story from all of my clients. Some aren't as, heartwarming as others, but and I'm sure you could too, because we hear so many stories and we get to help so many people, and depending on whatever the situation is. But it's when you look back, and some you remember more than others, and you think about more often than others. But yeah, it's a cool job, and I don't think everybody understands the full, what's the word I'm looking for?
Scope of the business, or of the job. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know you've seen those posts that are out there of, like, they make those list that goes down like 4 scrolls on your phone screen of what real estate agents do. And um, just I think you've got a better message of being able to tell stories instead of just listing it off, right? Because
Mhm.
like you mentioned earlier, where someone tells you what to do, you're like, I don't want to do that because you told me to do it. But if you're able to tell a story that helps them experience what you need them to do or what they should do, that's an entirely different mechanism of
Mhm.
connection, and it allows them to embrace it. So, I've seen marketing all over, and not necessarily marketing, just reels of starting to tell stories. And so when you mentioned the book, like, maybe this is reinforcement for me to do exactly what you said and just start writing the stories. And so I would encourage you to do that too. And I think there's a lot of, you could utilize that in a valuable way of like stories from real estate, and you just continue adding to it forever. And um, I think maybe that's your next project for 24, is
Yeah, that could
start writing the
be.
stories
Yeah.
down. I like it. All right, so we'll get to for the last question here. We'll get to the big question that I've been asking everybody. And what is one of the largest global challenges that you wish you could either resolve or at least put some energy towards to kind of help solve the problem?
Well, I think it kind of goes with what we just talked about. I think that I would love to help people have more trust in one another, and have people have more integrity in themselves, whether it's business related or it's just in general as a friend.
Yeah, it's a great, I mean, very, I've had people or not ramble, but talk about their global purpose for 5 minutes, and you just nailed it in like 3 sentences. And like, it goes right with your first statement of like, this is what it is, and that's what it is. So no, I love that. Being able to summarize it that quickly is so huge. So I'm gonna challenge you one more time on that, and just ask you, what would, if someone was gonna say, I want that too, what would you advise them to do and even in the smallest scale? What would be step one for someone listening or watching this to say, I want to start sparking more trust in the world? How do I do that?
By your actions, not by waving a sign up. I'm trustworthy. You can trust me. Trust me, and follow what your sentence is saying. It takes time, and it takes action, because people don't always listen, but they see and they notice when you start to change with your actions. So I would just say, whatever, just be truthful and act trustworthy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big ripple effect, right? Like when you start
Yep.
to formulate that in your own, and really, I would say that a lot of people, and this may trigger some of those people that were just in that scenario I was talking about, but a lot of people that don't see trust in the world don't trust themselves.
Right.
And so, I would even take what you said, and even go even one little step further, and maybe just say, like, start to trust yourself and do what you say you're going to do. And
Yeah.
whether that's showing up for your spouse or your clients or anything, just, show up for yourself first, and then you'll be able to carry that in, and emulate what emulate the trust aspect to that level that it'll start rippling through your circle. And once you establish that, everybody else kind of falls off if you don't. If you're
Right.
trustworthy and your friends aren't, they will disappear very quickly because it just doesn't line up that way. So
Right, exactly. And if you make a mistake, own up to it, say and apologize. And I think that speaks volumes, for your friends and your family and your coworkers or your employees. And, because I think a lot of people, that's kind of lumped into that trust factor, or category of, yeah, we're human, we all make mistakes. It sucks and you feel like crap and nobody ever wants to say, hey, I messed up or I'm sorry, I was wrong. All of that is very helpful when people with trust, because if you're going to hide that you made a mistake or did something, then and people know what clearly happened, then that kind of knocks that trust level down. And until you own up to your mistakes or wrongness or whatever, I think that you know people are going to be more, guarded and standoffish towards you.
I love that. So thanks for bringing that in. So the global challenge would be to trust more and be more trustworthy. So
Mhm.
Kayla, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you being on, and looking forward to collaborating with you a little bit more in the future. And I think we create some pretty damn good content. So I'd love to
Yeah.
work with you again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. Thanks for having me on.